Anarcho-Capitalists versus John Rawls' theory of fairness. In the previous chapter, we looked at the theory of justice as fairness. This relates to the best way of using the state's scarce resources for the execution of functions that the state and the state only can do. To recap, we said the theory of justice as fairness required government to ensure that everyone in the state can gain equal rights to public resources. Secondly, the discretionary distribution of resources by the state should be based on the principle of helping the most disadvantaged to gain the greatest benefit. And finally, access to public office should be open to all in the state to ensure fairness. These ideas helped governments in the capitalist countries to make the best use of public funds. And in the 20th century, helped the capitalist bloc to win the Cold War. On the opposite side of the spectrum, there are anarcho-capitalists who argue strongly that the centralized state must be eliminated because they monopolize the provision of public services and collect money through compulsory levies known as taxes. Neither governments or anarcho-capitalist societies will get everything right, but the anarcho-capitalists believe their means of social organization is more consistent with commonly held moral principles, thou shalt not steal and kill, and will result in a higher standard of living for everyone. History has certainly proved them correct on this later point, as capitalist societies have always outproduced statist ones. Thus, the term anarcho-capitalist refers to the absence of the state and an economic system based on private ownership of property. However, the anarcho-capitalists has no objection if some people organize communes, kibbutzes, or co-ops to administer their property jointly. These anarcho-capitalists embrace the idea that the centralized state only makes autocratic decrees and create bureaucracies that only serve the political elites and fail to benefit the masses. Anarcho-capitalists are often classified as libertarians. Many 20th century libertarians trace their roots to the Austrian school of economics. For example, Ludwig von Mises, who was not an anarcho-capitalist, argued in his magnum opus, Human Action, that one government intervention in the economy only led to further interventions. He also pointed out that production in non-capitalist societies would be decided by government bureaucrats and would not reflect the sovereignty of the consumers. For more, see www.mises.org. Anarcho-capitalists converged under the teachings of Murray Rothbard, who proposed the model for the protection of the free market in his book, For a New Liberty. Rothbard and others argued that rules are an essential part of life, but making them is not necessarily a government function. They can and usually are established through voluntary action and society-wide consensus. There are numerous voluntary organizations that govern much of our lives, such as family, clubs, associations, churches, businesses, and charities. The opposition of anarcho-capitalists to political authority does not entail opposition to social order. They believe that peaceful society is the result of human actions, not of human design. Anarcho-capitalists believe that society can best regulate itself voluntarily. There is really nothing mysterious about the free market, since every single transaction benefits both parties. Spontaneous actions of individuals aim at nothing other than improvement of their own state of satisfaction. This means that the government is not necessary to tell us what is right and wrong, to collect taxes, and decide how to spend money taken from the public. In reality, this makes sense to a large extent. How sure are we that a privileged group of politicians who have never experienced the pain and suffering of the masses would make laws that will help a poor and disadvantaged person living elsewhere? As a solution to this, the anarcho-capitalists argue for private individuals to plan their own affairs and manage it as they want. Conversely, we can think of what business theorists call the agency problem. This is the inherent problem of managers or directors appointed by shareholders to run a company, have their own interests, and there is a natural tendency for them to run the company in ways that benefits them. In the same way, governments also have their own version of the agency problem. There are the checks and balances in government constitutions. However, we all know how slow they work in highlighting conflict of interest issues and holding public office holders accountable. Then there is the risk that the political elite will collude. If one person in government favors a person in another arm of government, there will be the need to repay them. This is the quid pro quo notion. People will help their friends and mates. If they all enter government, they will collude and run the government only for themselves and their associates. Optimistic people tend to believe the public laws and administrative laws will keep government in check and there will be no collusion. However, anarcho-capitalists will have none of that. They believe the central government is just destined to become an elitist machine that will favor a few. Anarcho-capitalists do not claim their system of social organization is perfect, nor that all crime will disappear. Rather, they argue that among the systems of social organization offered, statist, socialist, communist, etc., their system will produce the least imperfect results. There will be fewer instances of collusion and violence compared to other programs. Then, anarcho-capitalists are also vocal in showing that the government and its activities are not needed. When looking at history, they argue that at one time or another, individuals and their voluntary associations have built roads, delivered the mails, provided arbitration services, educational facilities, and minted money. Karl Wattner, a libertarian writer, has documented much of his lost history in his book, I Must Speak Out. For more, see www.voluntarist.com. Applying the same line of reasoning to our modern times, we know of bitcoins and other cryptocurrencies that function outside the scope of government. Therefore, it makes sense to say that government is not necessary. In conclusion, the whole notion of central government as an entity that performs irreplaceable functions is challenged by the anarcho-capitalists. They argue that interaction among human beings rests on custom, habits, and convention, all of which rest on voluntary acceptance. As Thomas Paine wrote in 1792, great part of that order which reigns among mankind is not the effect of government. The mutual dependence and reciprocal interest which man has upon man, and all the parts of a civilized community upon each other, creates that great chain of connections which hold it together. Common interests regulate their concerns and form their laws, and the laws which common usage ordains have a greater influence than the laws of government. Therefore, we see society performing for itself everything which is ascribed to government. Rights of Man, Chapter 1, Book 2.